Tariffs, Tesla, and Elon Musk will dominate the monologue today. It will not be a marathon monologue. It will be a succinct monologue, I think. But welcome to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. But before we do that, I want to talk about Judge Hannah Duggan. Have you heard about her? She is a Wisconsin judge. She is actually in the circuit court of Wisconsin. And guess what happened to her yesterday? She got arrested for tampering with evidence and obstructing federal agents in their pursuit of an illegal immigrant. Eduardo Flores Ruiz was the illegal alien who evaded the arrest, and Judge Duggan was his willing accomplice. So Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have both posted on X, and Judge Duggan, I mean, I just cannot believe this. This lady is a sitting state court judge, and she intentionally misled federal agents in an attempt to avoid the arrest of Ruiz, who they were in search of. Now, this I found very interesting. She said that, where is it, Anthony? Did you hide it from me? Yeah. You did. Here it is. So this statement makes about as much sense as what she did. A lawyer for Judge Duggan, Craig Mastriano, said during the court hearing that the judge wholeheartedly regrets what she did and protest her arrest. Now, how can you regret what you did, but then say, but you don't have any right to arrest me? But the fact of the matter is, what she did put the public in danger. This guy obviously was one of those people that ICE was after because he had committed some sort of a dangerous crime, and that's why they were on his tail. But another judge, this one in New Mexico, along with his wife, they were arrested on Thursday of this week after prosecutors alleged that they allowed an illegal immigrant and a Trinidad Aragua gang member to live on their property. Judge Joel Cano resigned in March after the New Mexico Supreme Court told him that he could no longer, and not that he couldn't any longer serve in the state judiciary, but he could never serve on the state judiciary. His wife, Nancy, and Judge Cano face charges of evidence tampering. Video footage shows Cano speaking to FBI officials near his house, which was reposted by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. So this is the kind of accountability that we need. But you know what the headline's going to be? Fascist dictator Trump is arresting his political rivals. I mean, it's just nauseating. I was the guest of a radio host this week in Cincinnati, and he started talking about how these late night, quote, end quote, comedians. What's the guy on, who does the Tonight Show? I blocked his name. I don't even want, Jimmy Kimmel. No, the guy on CBS from the Ed Sullivan Theater. He just makes my blood boil. He's been on there. You don't watch TV? Yeah. Producer Anthony doesn't remember either, but you know who I'm talking about. He took over the Tonight Show, or the CBS Late Show, whatever it is. I can't. I quit watching. I literally quit watching, and so I struggle to remember their names. But they just make stuff up about Trump, and they call him horrible names. And this radio announcer asked me, the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Thank you, Anthony. Your Google is working today, isn't it? I wish my brain was working as good as your Google is working. But they, Colbert and Kimmel called Trump not a Nazi and analogize him to Hitler. And it really does make my blood boil. I mean, how many people has Donald J. Trump killed? Where are do either of those people have evidence of Trump committing genocide? That's what makes my blood boil, because he has not ever. Now, I think he did order the assassination of that Iranian Soleimani dude who was had killed many American servicemen, and we tracked him down, and President Trump ordered that he be eliminated. I don't know what you think of that. I mean, I guess when you're engaging in acts of war, which Iran was clearly doing, then it's justified. I don't know. I've got mixed emotions about it. I mean, if they could have killed him, could they have caught him and taken him before an international tribunal and tried him for his war crimes and then have allowed him to be punished? That would have been my preference. I think the rule of law should always govern, but I'm not defending anything that Soleimani did. I had very mixed emotions about us basically assassinating him. So what that did was caused Iran to say they were going to get back at Trump, and that they put a death warrant out on him. Some people think that the Butler assassination attempt was coordinated with perhaps Iran. Certainly foreign actors. I mean, we knew Crooks had apps on his phone that were foreign based. There were breadcrumbs leading to a foreign state, possibly coordinating with Crooks. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to the point. First, calling Donald Trump Hitler and a Nazi is just vile. It is so wrong. And I told the radio announcer in Cleveland when he asked me about it, I kind of reacted a bit emotionally in the moment. I don't really regret it. Maybe I would have preferred that I've responded differently, but I just said that, if somebody will say that to my face, they need to be prepared to receive a blow to their head, and I will aim for the back of their head, starting with the nose. That's how angry it really makes me, because it's so untrue to say such a vile thing about our president when he is working probably 18 to 20 hours a day on our behalf. And he is everything but. He is the opposite of Hitler or a fascist. But that's what the Democrats are. That's what they do best. They name call, they make stuff up, and then what do? They divide the country. And I place the blame squarely at Obama, Biden, and Harris's feet. Oh, and let's don't forget Hillary. And it's so sad to me that all those people that I just named are smart, which makes them more dangerous because they're also evil. And they are only evidently interested in their own political advantage and lust for power. And they're willing to stoop to no known lows to get their way. And it's revolting. It is utterly, positively revolting, and I think that it's evil. I have no qualms in categorizing it as sheer, unadulterated evil. And the result is that it just divides this country. And the majority of Americans, unfortunately, are not well informed. They're not listening to the truth today, even though they should. And so they just pick up these little snippets, these little sound bites, and it's convenient. So they just rely on people that they like. You know, they rely on Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. None of them have any credibility with me. The only person in that group that has any degree of credibility with me is Bill Clinton, because I do think that he occasionally has a lapse of judgment and actually does allow the truth to come out. And even Obama is willing to, at times, be more transparent. But certainly not Biden, certainly not Harris, certainly not Hillary Clinton. That's not their objective. All right, so we're going to talk about tariffs, Tesla, and Elon Musk. Now that we've gotten the immigration out of the way, I'm telling you, people better be careful. Do not harbor, do not interfere with ICE officials, law enforcement officials. If they come knocking and they're looking for somebody, you cannot lie. And if you're a judge or you're a law enforcement officer or you're in any kind of a position of authority, I think they're going to prosecute you, as they should. And this lady is just plain nuts. And this judge in New Mexico, he and his wife, I mean, how do they think they were going to get away with it? And it's not as if they didn't know, because I watched Holman say, if you help harbor someone that we're looking for and hide them or lie to our officers and divert them away, we're going to prosecute you. So I guess they just plain didn't believe him. But you see what's going to happen? Do you remember what I've talked about for the last 3 or 4 years? What do I call it? Trickle down ethics. That's what we're starting to see, and the snowball is starting to change direction, and it's rolling downhill in a positive direction. People are going to start being held accountable, and that is going to give other people pause, and they're not going to do dumb stuff that violates the law. And that's what these judges were both doing. They were violating not only the obvious of lying to a law enforcement official and effectively harboring a criminal. The judge was doing it in her own courtroom. And but the fundamental breach of the law was that they were subverting the immigration laws of the country. And that's what Joe Biden did. And that's why I say that impeachment was not good enough for him. He should be tried for treason because he did it willingly, knowingly, intentionally, and he lied to us while he was doing it, saying that he lacked the power to close the border. And Donald Trump, after within a week or 10 days of being president, had the border closed and illegal immigration slowed to a trickle. I'm so glad that Biden is no longer in the spotlight. Oh, Lord, thank goodness. There is justice. There is a God. And God has revealed himself. And he is leveling the table. And some of these people better watch out. They're going to have hell to pay. Trump's not done yet. Patel's not done yet. Bondi's not done yet. Noam is not done yet. And I think all Americans, all right-thinking Americans, are screaming for accountability. So Fox News, Maria in the Morning, is reporting that 15 tariff deals have been finalized. India, one of the world's largest economies, certainly in the top 5, is close to a deal. 90 countries are said to have are at the table negotiating trade deals. Last week we talked about how Donald Trump was remaking America's economy. And I really think that I understated what he was doing. He's really reshaping the global economy. And that's going to become very important in just a minute when I talk about it some more. You've heard me before, but I'm going to dig a little bit deeper this time. But tariffs are Trump's number one priority right now. Roman numeral 1 is tariffs. Roman numeral 1B is the great, big, beautiful bill. Roman numeral 1, letter C, would be investment in the U.S. It's staggering. In my entire adult lifetime, I have never heard the amount of investment that companies have already announced and are actively pursuing. It is going to reshape and remake our country's economy. And it's happening in real time right before our very eyes. Roman numeral 2 will be deregulation. Roman numeral 3 will be making the Trump tax cuts permanent. Roman numeral 4 actually relates to Roman numeral 1C, which is a great big beautiful bill, which will include additional tax cuts, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. I happen to actually like that one. I like them all, actually. But that no tax on Social Security kind of hits close to home. Inflation is ticking down, but when I counted up, it's $7 to $9 trillion in new investment. We've got the list here. Is this the list, Anthony? I've got too many papers on my desk. But the big deal is with China. And the deal with China is multifaceted. And it's not just a trade deal. It is a national security deal. And Trump is playing chess. And China wants to make moves on Taiwan. Well, Trump has made moves by sending the U.S. Navy into the China Sea and into the waters around Taiwan. But think about what else he's doing. He has sent our armed forces to Panama. And, you know, Jimmy Carter gave it away. I didn't understand it then. I do understand it now. It was just dumb. I don't know what he thought he was doing. We paid for the canal. We paid billions of dollars to construct it. I think it took 10 years. And we paid with human lives. Thousands of American workers lost their lives to malaria and it's infested with mosquitoes. And it was worse, and it was dangerous, and thousands of American workers building the canal lost their lives. And Carter just, let's be nice. Let's nice everybody to death, and we'll just give them the Panama Canal. And it was accompanied by an agreement. And there were certain agreements that were made in perpetuity. And one is that the United States would receive most favored nations clauses with our vessels traveling through the Panama Canal. So what do you roll the tape forward now? 20 years, 25 years, what do we see? China has infected the Panama Canal. They're Chinese on the front of the canal. They're Chinese on the back of the canal. Many of the vessels traveling through the canal are Chinese, and they are raping and surcharging American vessels. It's scandalous. That agreement is not worth the paper it's written on, and Trump has said no more. And so now he's booting the Chinese out. And he's talking about taking over Greenland. You sure you want to talk about taking over Taiwan? Because if you do, we're going to take over Greenland. And by the way, we might just do it anyway. All right, let's look at some of the investments that Trump is talking about. Apple, I know you've heard this one, $500 billion. Plans call for spending $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years and adding 20,000 jobs. Then a consortium of SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle called Stargate have pledged $500 billion and are going to create 200,000 jobs. NVIDIA, $200 billion that they're going to spend on U.S. chip manufacturing. Johnson & Johnson, $55 billion and 5,000 new jobs. Eli Lilly, $27 billion and 3,000 new jobs. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, and it totals somewhere north of $5 to $7 trillion. Trump said it was $9 trillion. If he said it, I believe him. But it is going to be phenomenal. So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has more or less taken over the trade negotiations with these countries. He appeared before the Institute of International Finance this week, and here's what he had to say.
Treating China, the second largest country in the world, as a developing country is absurd. While it has been at the expense of many Western markets, China's rise has been rapid and impressive. If China wants to play a role in the global economy commensurate with its actual importance, then the country needs to graduate up. We welcome that.
That's exactly what I said about the EU. You see, we put these deals in place when they actually make sense, and they just stay there for decades until they make no sense. But then they act like spoiled children. We've gave favorable trade. We made favorable trade deals with Europe, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Great Britain after World War II because Hitler decimated it. I mean, World War II inflicted great harm on Europe. So being the generous people that we are and allies of those countries, we saved their bacon, by the way. We helped rebuild Europe. And one of the ways we did it was through favorable trade deals. But that was 70 years ago. That it's no longer relevant in 2025. So we've got to rebalance the scales. and they sound like little babies crying. Wah, wah, wah. You're taking away our money. Well, it's not your money. It's the United States' money, and we're putting the United States' interest first for a change. And by the way, you've just completely taken advantage of our generosity and our good nature, and it is not going to happen any longer. And President Trump is so right, and Scott Bessent just summarized it so eloquently. Here's what else he had to say at that conference.
What I have said previously, there is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Right. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together. This is an incredible opportunity. And I think if Bridgewater founder Ray Dalio were to write something, he could call it a beautiful rebalancing.
I happen to like Ray Dalio, but I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he has been saying lately. I mean, these guys, Ray Dalio, Robert Kiyosaki, what's the guy from Great Britain? He's been very successful. He has a huge hedge fund. They've all been talking about a recession for the last 5 years. That there is impending doom and gloom. You better get ready, because we're about to have another bubble that's going to bust. And I have to confess that I bit hook, line, and sinker, and I told this audience that like 4 years ago, and they caused me to freak out enough that I sold a significant amount of my portfolio, and I did it because I also had debt that I didn't like. And if there had been a 2008 event, it could have really materially affected my family's financial security. And unfortunately, I have seen that happen to others. And so I did not want to get caught. It was probably the right thing to do anyway, and I probably would have done it. I would have done it anyway, but I can tell you that these people really did. I have such tremendous respect for them, for each of those people, that I really did listen to them. In hindsight, of course, I wish I hadn't, because even under Biden, the stock market went up. When you put $2 trillion of fake money into the economy, it's going to cause the whole tide to rise. The only problem is that there's going to be a day of reckoning for that, and that's what's known as inflation, and that's what's known as the Federal Reserve raising interest rates from 0 to 7.5% at the high water mark, and we had 9% inflation. Well, folks, that's just a 9% haircut. Take your dollar and trim 10% of it off, and that's what you've got left. It is a devaluation of your savings and your personal disposable income. There's no other way to see it. And so that caused a lot of people pain. And but in hindsight, nevertheless, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, they did rise. You cannot deny the fact. And it happened in spite of Biden, not because of him. And now Trump is called on to clean up the mess that Biden made. We had the Kool-Aid. We took the heroin, which was free money, and now we're having to go into rehab and wean ourselves off of it. and it's kind of painful. But the way that Trump is doing it is masterful. The first thing that he's done is masterful is that he has surrounded himself with the best and the brightest. Elon Musk, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Commerce. I mean, these guys are geniuses. And they're masterfully going about recrafting our economy. And they're doing it with Elon Musk eliminating the fraud, waste, and abuse, and Scott Bessent negotiating new trade deals, and then the Secretary of Commerce, what's his name, Anthony? I can see him. He was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald at 9/11. Everybody on the radio is saying, "What's the matter with you? You know his name is a household name now." He's a genius and a good person to boot. Howard Lutnick. Thank you, Anthony. Anthony, you want to just trade places over here?
Yeah, I'll do the show this
Why don't you come do the show and I'll just run the soundboard? You're doing a great job. But they are walking this high wire act of having to tame inflation while not wrecking the economy. And while I'm on that subject, I don't think Jerome Powell gets near the credit that I think he deserves. I'm not saying he's perfect, but to deal with the stuff, the mud that is thrown at him. I mean, Trump gets in his face pretty good. I mean, Trump was very disparaging towards Jerome Powell a couple of weeks ago. And one of the people in the administration said that he had been charged with starting to review potential candidates to replace Powell. Well, his term's up in a year. And then Trump pretty quickly, within 48 or 72 hours, said, "No, I'm not replacing Jerome Powell." Now, you think something may have happened in the meantime? You think maybe Trump and Powell back-channeled each other? I don't know whether the president can talk to Powell or not. I think he can. I think they can talk. I don't think there is an iron curtain there. I mean, clearly if Trump called John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or any justice of the Supreme Court, and started engaging about a case actively before the Supreme Court, that would violate every rule of ethics and the canons of ethics and judicial codes. But I don't think there's that kind of wall between the president and the head of the Federal Reserve Board. But I do think that they impose self-discipline and probably don't collude. But the fact of the matter is, I'm just making stuff up at this point because I don't really know. But what I do know is that in the news cycle, it changed abruptly, like 180 degrees, where on Monday they were looking for replacements for Jerome Powell. And on Wednesday, Trump said, "Well, I'm not going to replace Jerome Powell." I think something happened. I think they either talked or there was an intermediary, maybe Bessent, Secretary of the Treasury. He could certainly talk to Jerome Powell. And maybe they reached an accord. And now, just yesterday, Fox is reporting 4 rate declines in this year, with the first likely to occur in June. How convenient. But you see, the danger in that is you lower interest rates, you add a dose of gasoline onto the inflation fire. You take a bellow and you blow on it really hard. But if at the same time you reduce federal spending, which, as I've said before, I believe, and others do as well, is deflationary. Actually, it can slow the economy, and that's the danger. I mean, you just can't take $2 trillion of federal spending away from the economy and not expect it to have repercussions unless there is something to balance it. So, I mean, they're really on a seesaw, and it's kind of like a balloon. You poke on one side and it pokes out on the other. And so I think that we're watching this all unfold in real time right before our very eyes. And as a economics major in college and a student of economics my entire life and an observer and an investor, I think it is absolutely fascinating and masterful if they pull it off. And I think that they will, because you've got $7 trillion, $9 trillion of new investment that's going to happen over the next 4 years, but a lot of it is front loaded because a lot of it is going to be happening this year. But we've got to figure out how to balance trade with China. And I think there is a national security component to our dealings with China. And interestingly, as I have said here also, I've said we've got the upper hand with the EU. They can bluster all they want to, but we provide for their defense. We provide more dollars for Europe's defense than Europe provides for their defense. And that's the other thing Trump has said. You've got to pay your part. We're going to help you because we're all in this together. If Russia moves towards the west, it's not going to be in our best interest either. Even though we do have a sea and an ocean between us, we still need to constrain the evil empire and keep Russia in check. So where the EU is concerned, they really don't have much bargaining power. They really don't. China, on the other hand, is the second largest world economy, as you heard Secretary Bessent say. And they've got much more bargaining power. And we are so enmeshed with China that we've got to decouple for our own national security. I mean, I read that 90% of our pharmaceuticals are produced in China. That's just insane. And Trump says the people that sat in his chair before him allowed it to happen, and it was just plain dumb. So we've got to decouple from China. How are we doing it? Well, J&J is investing $50 million in U.S. manufacturing. They have already begun. Eli Lilly has committed over $50 billion, and half of that since President Trump was elected, and it's all to manufacture pharmaceuticals in the United States. 3 for active pharmaceuticals and 1 plant for injectables, and it's going to create 13,000 jobs, including 3,000 skilled jobs, but 10,000 construction jobs. CEO David Ricks credits the 2017 Trump tax cuts and points to looming tariffs as their motivation. Merck is going to spend $21 billion. Roche is committing $50 billion. They've already moved manufacturing for 3 of their drugs to the United States and are currently seeking regulatory approval for more U.S. manufacturing. And the company, too, cites tariffs as their motivation. Corning, Merck, and Pfizer have entered a joint venture for $4 billion to make pharmaceutical glass containers. And speaking of Merck, they reported $200 million in expected decline of income because of tariffs. Well, that's funny because I thought the manufacturers were going to pass those costs on to the consumer. No? Well, in their earnings call this week, Merck said that they were going to take a $200 million haircut this year because of tariffs. But they also said, drum roll, that they are investing in U.S. manufacturing, creating potentially tens of thousands of new jobs. And tariffs have the potential to create millions of new jobs. Not because you tariff, but because the tariffs cause the companies to manufacture here and employ our people. I mean, we have been financing China as they build their economy. And what do they do with the prosperity their newfound prosperity? They use it to build nuclear weapons. But they also just flat out play dirty. I don't know why they feel so emboldened, but they steal our intellectual property. They pollute the air and the seas. They utilize child labor. They don't have fair labor laws. They have little regulation. And that's what U.S. companies have to compete against. And they don't have those inherent costs in China, but they do here. And so that's why President Trump is reducing regulation as fast as he can so that American companies can be more competitive. Now here is some chest thumping from Chairman Z, or Xi, whatever his name is.
China is warning other countries from making any trade deals with the United States, as countries like Japan and South Korea have begun negotiations with the Trump administration. China's Commerce Ministry releasing a statement saying, quote, China firmly opposes any party reaching a deal at the expense of China's interests. If this happens, China will never accept it, and it will resolutely take countermeasures in a reciprocal manner. China is determined and capable of safeguarding its own rights and interests.
Well, they must be crazy because the train is moving down the track. Vietnam has already removed all tariffs on the United States. Their tariffs on the U.S. are zero. Other countries are quickly reducing their tariffs. And China is digging their feet in. Well, great. I say that's wonderful because all Xi is doing is speeding U.S. investment to effectively compete against them. Can't happen fast enough for me, but it is most assuredly happening. So, Tesla was in the news this week. They announced their earnings call. And I don't know whether you saw it or not, but here's a clip that gave us the news.
Well, futures extending yesterday's gains this morning. As you can see, Dow up 622 in the pre-market, NASDAQ up 463, S&P up 112. Trade optimism is fueling these markets. The Dow and the Nasdaq both jumping nearly 3%. The S&P 500 up 2.5% at the close last night. Tesla reporting after the bell a double miss. Its net income plunging 71% in Q1. Revenue $19.3 billion, a 9% slide year over year. Tesla's automotive business falling 20% in the same time frame. Earnings per share 27 cents. The estimate was 44 cents. Tesla stock, however, is up 6.35% this morning because CEO Elon Musk says he's going to be putting more focus on his car company now. Watch.
Starting probably in next month, May, my time allocation to Doge will drop significantly. I'll have to continue doing it for, I think, probably the remainder of the president's term, just to make sure that the waste and fraud that we stop does not come roaring back. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla. And now that the major work of establishing the Department of Government Efficiency is done.
So how do you reconcile that? A decline in profits of 70%, yet since that announcement, the stock is up 25%. Now, if that's not counterintuitive, I don't know what is. But now you need to know the rest of the story. As I have been encouraging our listeners and viewers of our live stream, which come to you on Getter, Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook, please feel free to tune in to us there every Saturday. And you can also catch our podcasts that are posted throughout the week on those social media platforms. Of course, we also come to you on the John Fredericks Media Network on 22 AM and FM radio stations in 8 cities. And don't forget our friends at CDM Press. They're on 13 digital channels. They simulcast our program on Getter and Rumble and their own platforms. They care about the truth, and they've suffered consequences of telling the truth, just like we have, but to a lesser extent. But as I've been saying now for some time, Tesla, I believe, is going to be one of the greatest companies that the world has ever seen. So while telling us about the poor earnings report by any measure, they also gave us the why. Now, part of it is the hit that the Tesla brand has taken because of Elon Musk's involvement with Doge. You can't deny that it's had an effect. But I maintain that that is not the primary reason. And what the mainstream media refuses to report, because they only want to demonize Elon Musk, is that the company has remade the Model Y. The Model Y is the best-selling car in the world. It's the number one bestseller in China. It's the number one bestseller in Europe. It's the number one bestseller in the United States. It is the number one best-selling car in the world. But after, I don't know, let me think. I think 7 years, maybe 8 years since it was introduced. They're remaking it. They're making it look sleeker, more glitz, glamour. I don't know. It's a good-looking redesign, and they have improved the interior. They're making it an even better car than it already was. But because those changes are announced, guess what? people aren't buying Model Ys because the car's not in full production, and they can't make them fast enough because their line has not been retooled, and the supply chain has not been refilled so that they can scale, so that they can produce at scale. And that is why Tesla's earnings are down, in my opinion. That is the number one reason. Guess what? That's going to be short-lived. We're about to see the results of pent-up demand. But that's not all. People who tune into the truth also know that I have a Tesla and I have full self-driving on it. And I can drive and do every day wherever I'm going. I just tell the car the destination I want to go to. I hit the button and it miraculously, flawlessly takes me there. On side streets, through roundabouts, on probably South Florida's busiest interstate, I-95, and it changes lanes and predicts where it needs to change lanes to make an exit ramp. I mean, it is nothing short of miraculous. They've gotten regulatory approval to put it in their new robo-taxi in Austin, Texas, beginning in June. People have not even begun to assess the impact and significance of that. Tesla's got $38 billion in cash on its balance sheet. And they have expensed a huge portion of their research and development on autonomous driving, otherwise known as full self-driving FSD. And it is on the verge of receiving regulatory approval nationwide. I believe that it will happen before the end of this year. And what really needs to happen for that to happen is for Tesla to deploy the robo-taxi, and I'm going to talk about that some more in a minute, which is mind-boggling. But they're going to deploy it in Austin in June. They're already testing it. If you want to see something miraculous, go on YouTube, look up Tesla full self-driving, and watch Teslas rolling off the assembly line and driving themselves to their parking spot that may be a mile or two away. The car drives itself out of the assembly plant, down the road, and turns into the next available parking spot in where Tesla deposits all their inventory. There's no driver. It's done autonomously. And what is going to happen in August or in Austin in June is that invention is going to be on the public roadways without a driver. And what is the significance of that? Well, first of all, we hope that there are not going to be any accidents. And we sure as heck hope there are no fatalities. That'll be a test. There will be a virtual driver. There will be a driver that is watching the car in real time on a big screen at Tesla's headquarters that could intervene if they see something that is alarming or the car is not seemingly able to handle. That's a footnote. How long is that going to last? I don't know. How long is it going to be required? Depends on whether there are any accidents and, God forbid, any fatalities. That would be devastating news. But you have to look at it this way. 43,000 people lose their lives on American roadways every year. And over 1 million sustain injury in automobile accidents. So the American public has got to be dissuaded of this notion that full self-driving has to be perfect. I mean, how about if it's just 50% better than a human driver? And what if it is able to reduce fatal accidents by 50%? Isn't 23,000, 22,000 American lives, a lot of whom are teenagers and college-age kids, joining the prime of their life? And if it can reduce the number of people sent to emergency rooms and the number of people who are paralyzed, I don't have the numbers on that, but they're astronomical. What if they can reduce those in half? Look at the human suffering that is going to be saved and eliminated. And it will only continue to get better. And someday, it will become infallible, or nearly so. And then we save 43,000 U.S. lives a year. And I don't remember, 3 million worldwide maybe, I think. The numbers are staggering. And it is coming so fast. And Austin, Texas is the proving ground. And it's not next decade. It's not at the end of this decade. It's not at the end of this year. It's at the end of month after next that these vehicles will be deployed. So autonomous driving is at the doorstep. Wall Street analysts that I have listened to estimate that will contribute up to as much as $1 trillion of new revenue for Tesla. And they've got 4 million cars on the road right now with the cameras already installed. So if an owner doesn't have the software, all they have to do is go online and buy it. You can pay, I think it's $7,500 now to buy full self-driving software, or you can rent it by the month, which is going to be easier for some people to absorb the cost. And guess what? That money is going to fall virtually straight to Tesla's bottom line because they've written off so much of the research and development that has gone into the development of this amazing software. So you couple full self-driving autonomous software with robo-taxis. Now, robo-taxis is just really a Uber or a Lyft without a driver that drives autonomously. And you say, so what's the big deal? Well, I'll tell you the big deal. A Uber cost a consumer on the average $6 per mile. That's what it costs you to ride in an Uber or a Lyft nationwide on the average. The autonomous robo-taxi, $1.70. Do the math. Which are you going to ride in? A Uber with a driver who lacks good personal hygiene and likes to listen to EDM music and doesn't have a very clean car? Or would you rather get into a freshly cleaned, nice smelling, driverless car where you aren't compelled to make chit chat with the driver you don't want to really engage? Now, if you like that engagement, you want to pay an extra $5, and by all means, continue to ride in Uber or Lyft. Analysts predict that that's going to be another $1 trillion. Not of revenue, but market value. Tesla today is valued at $750 billion. 6 months ago, it was $1.2 trillion. It'll be back there as soon as this tariff deal gets resolved, as soon as Musk steps away from Doge, which he is saying that he's going to do next month. He's going to cut his time by 2/3, I believe is what I've read and what he has said. Because his shareholders and his customers are saying, we need you back in the driver's seat at Tesla. And personally, I think Musk is just fed up with it. I mean, the number of threats on his life escalate daily. And the violence that has been inflicted on Tesla dealerships and by Tesla car owners is so wrong and so misplaced. But who can blame Musk for saying, okay, I've got it. I've got Doge set up. I've recruited the brightest and the best, and they will carry on, and I'm going to go back to Tesla and do my job. And the market loves it. And I like it. I personally, I would rather him stay at Doge. I think America has much more to gain by his work at Doge right now than we do without him, and that I would if he were full-time at Tesla, because I'm selfish. Actually, I'm not. But if I were, I would want him at Tesla because I own a lot of Tesla stock. And nothing I have said today should be construed as financial advice, and I could be dead ass wrong. So don't rely on anything I've told you to make your investment decision. But I would encourage you to take a real strong look, but do your own research. Get on YouTube. There are a lot of Tesla fanboys that are on there, and you can read anything you want. You can look and delve into anything we've talked about today. There are a multitude of Tesla or of YouTube videos about Tesla, full self-driving, robo-taxi. And the final one that we haven't talked about today is the Optimus humanoid robot. The Optimus robot will mow your grass, wash your dishes, give you a massage, take the trash out, take the Herbie Kirby to the street, walk your dog around the block. It is designed to do repetitive, menial, boring, and dangerous tasks. So what kind of dangerous task? The first one that comes to mind will be cleaning your gutters or replacing your roof. I don't think you can calculate what the potential value will be to Tesla. But we're talking in the trillions. And, you know, it's Star Wars stuff. We won't see it for another 10 years probably. Except that Musk says that they're going to produce thousands this year and that they'll be commercially available next year. And I'm going to be first in line. I want my little Tesla Robo Buddy. I've got to come up with a name for him. If you have an idea for a name, you can email me at johngordonTruth@gmail.com. And with all the social media platforms I talked about, I left out the one that I should remember the most, and that is we live stream to you every Saturday and on our podcast at johngordon.tv. So people ask me all the time, where can I go see your videos? And I'm not making up that. Somebody every day walks up to me and says, where can I see catch your videos? johngordon.tv. It was rumble.com. And you can still find them on rumble.com, youtube.com. The audio is on getter.com. And the audio and video are on X and Facebook. But the easiest one is just johngordon.tv. So come and check us out. And if you want to do me a favor, you know, we don't do advertising on the program yet. I'm a capitalist. I'd like to monetize the program at some point, but we've got to build the channel. And right now, all I ask of you is that you just consider subscribing to those channels and liking our video. It costs you nothing. Doesn't cost to subscribe, and it doesn't cost, and it actually feels good to hit the like button. You'll feel good. Just try it. You'll like it. I'm almost sure you will. And that allows us to continue to build our audience, and maybe someday we will get a reward monetarily, but that is not my goal. That has nothing to do, as God is my witness, with my motivation every day when I wake up and think about this week's version of the truth. And when I think about how glad I will be when there is no pollen left in the air, because yes, I know this comes as a great surprise to you, but I do suffer from seasonal allergies, and it's been a rough season. All right, well, thank you for listening to me today, to the monologue. We have Troy Anderson coming on. Have you ever heard of children's books called The Adventures of Baron Trump? I hadn't. And they were authored in the 1890s. But producer Anthony, sitting over here, told me that he was vaguely aware of these books because he collects books and reads books. Anthony, by the way, is brilliant. And I am so lucky, fortunate, and blessed to be able to work with Anthony. And by the way, so are you, because I could not do this broadcast without him. Every week, 5 days a week, Anthony and I work on this broadcast. And so does Christy, by the way. She helps book our guests and communicate with our publicists who feed us potential guests for the program. And so we've just got a great team. Brian Riesinger is the author of Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. This one just went straight to my soul because all of my ancestors were farmers on both sides of my family. And when I was a kid, I used to play in my grandfather's barn, and I would chase the pony at my great uncle's farm for an hour so I could ride it for 10 minutes before it bucked me off. And I would chase little kittens for an hour before they would get tired and wear down, and I could catch one and pet it. I'd love going to the farms. My grandfather, my great uncle Guy, my great aunt Elma, my uncle Warren, they all had farms in mid-Ohio, and they just brought me such happy memories. And Brian is going to talk about his similar lineage and ancestors, and his father and sister's efforts to keep their family farm alive today. And it is farming has always been hard. It has become less hard, even though it's hard, from a labor standpoint, because so much of farming today is automated. There are autonomous tractors, believe it or not, and there are autonomous harvesters. I mean, you can get a big John Deere out there and your laptop computer and have it go harvest the corn. It's pretty unbelievable. But it's always been hard because you've got nature. You've got too much water, not enough water. Too much wind, not enough wind. You got to have wind to pollinate, but too much wind messes it all up. And then now you've got trade issues because China actually is a huge importer of our agriculture. And the tariffs are going to make it really tough on American farmers. Oh, the Adventures of Baron Trump. It was a children's book written in the 1890s. It was a series of children's books. And guess what Baron Trump's boss's name was? Don. And Troy Anderson, he's written a book called The Trump Code, Exploring Time Travel, Nikola Tesla, and the Trump Lineage. And he's going to be our first guest up in just a moment. But I want to finish with my salute to Elon Musk. This guy does not deserve the treatment that has been heaped on him. Not even close. Do you know I actually heard Jimmy Fallon call him an idiot the other day, and one of the people on The View said that he was stupid? Well, they're just either uninformed or they lie. And I happen to think it's more the latter. But Musk founded his first company in 1996. It was called Zip2. The company licensed city guides to newspapers, helping them integrate mapping and business listings on their newly found websites. That was just when the internet was really getting going good. I guess the internet really came on the scene in the late 80s. But this dummy, Elon Musk, so 99, that was 25 years ago. So he was in his mid-20s then. This stupid guy, Elon Musk, sold that company to Compaq in 1999 for a mere $307 million. And Musk personally pocketed $22 million on the sale. He's just a dumbass. What does he know? Then he helped found PayPal. And you know that PayPal, you probably use it. I refuse to use it because they said that if you posted things that were contrary to the vaccine, that they could take your money or they would deduct $2,500 from your PayPal account. That's when I closed mine immediately that day. Just by the way, they also own Venmo. So you might want to find another payment service to use. I refuse to use PayPal or Venmo. But eBay acquired PayPal in 2002 for $1.5 billion, of which dummy Musk pocketed $180 million. Since then, he founded SpaceX. I don't know what the market value of SpaceX would be if it were for sale or traded publicly. Then he became the CEO of Tesla in 2008 as it was teetering on going out of business. Under its leadership, Tesla developed groundbreaking electric vehicles, starting with the high-priced, high-performance Roadster in 2008, followed by the Model S in 2012, demonstrating that electric cars could be luxury, could beat and compete with luxury gas-powered vehicles. Then he developed the more affordable Model 3, which was released in 2017, opening Tesla to mass market acceptance. Tesla became the most valuable car manufacturer in the world following that. Musk also has launched Tesla Energy after buying Solar City, over which he was sued by shareholders that objected to Tesla buying that company, because I think his brother had an interest in Solar City, and they weren't really doing all that well. So somebody said that it was just an inside deal, that Musk was trying to bail out his brother. Wrong. It's now taking in billions of dollars of revenue. And Musk says that we haven't even begun to see Tesla energy at scale. Then he founded this other company, little company called the Boring Company. You may have actually ridden in one of the Boring Company's tunnels because it connects the Tesla Las Vegas Loop, which is an operational underground transit system, and it connects hotels in Las Vegas with the convention center. And you don't have to go out inside in the horrible heat of the Las Vegas sun in the middle of the summer. You can just go underground and take the Boring Company's Vegas Loop from your hotel to the convention center. And then he found yet another company called Neuralink. Tesla or Musk founded Neuralink in 2016. And this horrible human being, this evil human being, as described by Jimmy Fallon and members of The View, has the aspiration of putting chips, implanting them in the spinal column and connecting them to human brains who suffer from paralysis, epilepsy, and brain injuries. And Musk envisions a future where humans can communicate via computer, directing the Neuralink through the Neuralink implant, which will produce the ability to regain use of otherwise paralyzed limbs. I mean, the more you learn about Elon Musk, the more you have to love the guy. And he could retire today. He does not need to work at Doge. He's not. Look, if you're the richest man in the world, do you really need another 50 cents? Do you really care about the almighty dollar once you reach that pinnacle? I promise you, unless I'm just completely wrong, and I don't believe that I am, because I have studied this guy. I have read Walter Isaacson's biography. I have read every piece of literature and every article I can find on Musk. I have a lot of empathy for him because, as I've shared with you in the past, I was bullied in school because I was a gangly, skinny runt that was uncoordinated, and I got a lot of grief. It's okay. I thank those people. The Bible says, love your enemies. I never looked at them as my enemies. I felt mistreated and taken advantage of. That's okay. They spurred me on to prove them wrong in life. I think I've done a pretty decent job of that, frankly. I mean, I don't know what you measure it by. I've got a wife of 47 years. Is it 47? Yeah. Yeah, we're in our 47th. Yeah, that's it. 47. And we'll have made it 48 in September if we make it. I mean, I think the path looks pretty darn good. And we have 3 wonderful sons and a granddaughter. And we just learned last week, our son and daughter-in-law and our granddaughter visited us in West Palm Beach. We took them out to dinner, and little Gable took off her sweater, and underneath she had a T-shirt that said Big Sister. I was like, that's a strange T-shirt. And I did a double take. I said, what does that mean? And I was like, oh my God. she's going to have a sibling. And I was so excited I didn't even bother to ask what the sex was. But I was subsequently informed it's a little boy. So we are very happy in the Gordon household. I have a lot to be thankful for. I literally get down on my knees every day, multiple times, and I thank God for my health, for my family, and for the financial success that I have enjoyed. I own and actively operate 3 businesses. I started working when I was 12. I had my own vending business. I sold Coca-Colas and peanuts and crackers and so forth to construction workers that were building houses next to my parents' house. We were the first house on 2 new streets. We were the first house in the neighborhood. And I got the idea, I don't know how, I wanted to sell soft drinks to the workers. And my pockets were flush. Oh my gosh. At the end of the day, it was all I could do to walk home because my pockets were so heavy, loaded down with quarters. But I loved business. I loved selling. I loved earning money. I make no apology for that. And so while my friends were out playing basketball and learning to play baseball, I was on the Little League team. I just sucked at it. I could say I just stunk at it, but that would not do it justice. I just plain sucked at it. And I was a little scared of the ball. That baseball's hard. And with somewhat good reason, because my best friend Bill played on our baseball team, and he got hit in the eye with a baseball when he was at bat, and he had to go to bed for 6 weeks and almost lost his eyesight. So I don't know if I was smart or just chicken, but I had a healthy respect for that hard baseball, and it was not my favorite thing to do. So instead, I worked. I worked in my concession business until all the houses got built. Doggone it. I was out of business at the end of that, so I went to work for Burger Chef. There weren't many Burger Chefs around, but I found one. And I made 85 cents an hour. And when I complained, they said, well, you get 2 hamburgers and a French fry and a beverage of your choice on every shift. So that's why we only pay you 85 cents. And there were no tips, believe me. So, but they said, don't worry, in a year, we'll give you a nickel raise. And I said, okay, well, I'm ambitious. I'll tough it out for the nickel raise. So when the year rolled around and I went to my boss, I'm just going to call him Mr. W, because I don't want to disparage the dead. And I actually, even though he screwed me over, I actually liked him and I liked his kids. They were really pretty nice to me, except when it came time to get my nickel raise. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So I went home and I got on the phone and I called every single person I knew in Macon, Georgia that owned the business. And I'm just so grateful. And I will tell you his name, Bob McCommon, gave me a job at the cotton mill. And I went from 85 cents an hour to $3.60 an hour. And I really appreciated it. And I love those guys that work there. You know, my dad was a banker. I grew up on the other side of the tracks, and they tested me at every turn, but they didn't do it in a mean way. They just toughened me up and woke me up to the real world. And I genuinely love those guys. And Lee and his brother and Doc. There were 5 or 6 of us. We worked in the machine shop. And by the end of the day, I would just be covered, literally covered in grease. My boss would send me upstairs to get him a RC Cola and a pack of crackers. And when I would go up there, the vending machine was in the spinning room. and the spinning room was about the length of a football field, maybe even a little bit longer. And there were hundreds of spinners that would take cotton that would come off these big rolls and spin them onto little bobbins that later would be wrapped and sold in upholstery stores, wherever they sold the stuff. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen them. And the air was filled with lint. And I would get Lee, my boss, his RC cola and pack of crackers, and go back down to the machine room, and they would all burst out laughing because I looked like Tar Baby. I was covered from head to toe with grease and cotton lint, but it was okay. One day it was not okay. I told Lee, I said, Lee, I'm sorry, I just can't do it today. He said, it's no problem. He said, we just got 2 cants around here. I said, oh yeah, what's that? He said, you can't do it, you can't stay. I said, okay, I'll go get you your RC cola and pack of crackers. And once again, I came back down and gave them their good laugh for the day. But I thanked, and I am thankful that I had those opportunities. And Elon Musk, what got me off on that serious detour was that I have a lot of empathy for Elon Musk because he was tormented as a kid. He was small and uncoordinated and didn't play sports. And he was also on the spectrum, we think. And he was severely picked on. I didn't encounter a lot of physical abuse. But Robert, I remember you. And a couple other people that would rough me up on the playground and in the locker room after when we go back to change to go back to class. I remember you, and I thank you. I really thank you because you gave me purpose. You set me on a course to prove you wrong. So come visit. Come see me. So Musk developed or helped found OpenAI, and it was to provide an open architecture so anybody could get the code and do their own artificial intelligence. And then his business partners decided from doing a not-for-profit company that they were going to change it for a for-profit company. And I'll tell you that guy's name. You've heard it too. Sam Altman. Anthony couldn't even Google it fast enough. See, I still got it. Anthony is back there. That brain's still there. Sam Altman, and he decided that he was going to change the nature of OpenAI. And so they got into a lawsuit, and I think it's still ongoing, but Musk basically just said, to hell with you. Now, OpenAI, by the way, I guess it's closed AI today, but they developed ChatGPT. And now Musk has developed X AI. Oh yeah, did I mention that he bought Twitter because he considered them to be anti-free speech? He paid $54 billion for Twitter so that we could have a town square for free speech. Now, I have read where there is potentially some hypocrisy there because Musk has silenced some of his critics and taken away their X account. But I don't think it was to silence his critics. I think it was because they were flagrantly telling lies and deliberately, intentionally spreading false information. Now, my attitude, and I thought Elon's as well, was let the town hall censor them and hold them accountable. But he has taken some people's privileges away, like Alex Jones. And he was celebrated for taking away Alex Jones' privileges because Alex Jones exploited and defamed the children who died in the Texas school shooting, Sandy Hook, and said that that really didn't happen. What an idiot. Now, I've watched Alex Jones, and some of his stuff is riveting. He is the consummate conspiratorialist. And some of the stuff that he said, talked about, has been proven to be right. But Sandy Hook was a serious, serious error in judgment and an abuse of his platform, and hugely hurtful to the parents that lost children at Sandy Hook. So Musk did take away his freedom of speech on X. And he got a lot of blowback for it. Musk did. So he ran a poll and he said, do you want me to return Alex Jones' account? And the poll overwhelmingly favored it. So Musk gave him the account back. But I think that's where Musk has, those are many of Musk's accomplishments. But now, because of his falling out with Sam Altman and the betrayal of open AI, Musk has now formed XAI and has brought to you Grok. And Grok has accomplished in 3 years what OpenAI has done in 10. Grok has one of the largest supercomputers in the world. And instead of going to ChatGPT, you can go to Grok 3 and ask them their questions. I have read that Grok 3 tends to lean more to the right, while OpenAI tends to cloud its narrative more to the left. I don't know. I don't know whether either of those statements are true. But I have started using them. And I'm telling you, they are phenomenal. Phenomenal tools. And the only reason I resisted using them was because I felt like it was plagiarizing. It still feels like cheating. But I will tell you, none of today's programs or any past programs have been influenced or produced by virtue of ChatGPT or Grok 3. But I am starting to use it, and I can't promise you that I will not go there for research in the future and utilize it for background on stories that we run on The Truth. But I will promise you that I will not read from those without attribution, if I read from them at all. All right. Well, thank you for being so patient with me. I've really talked longer than normal today, but I felt like I had a lot to say, and I hope that you agree. And if you agree or disagree, write me at johngordontruth@gmail.com. I read every single email I get, and I will answer you, and appreciate your interest. Now let's get right to the Barron Trump adventures and our interview with the author, Troy Anderson, of the Trump Code. The world is a pretty dangerous place these days. It seems like there's no shortage of bad news. We're witnessing a war in the Ukraine that Trump's trying to end. We've witnessed Middle East conflicts all of my life, and it certainly has heated up over the last 2 years. And now we've got a war on trade being conducted on the worldwide stage. Troy Anderson is here to help us sort it all out. He is the author of a best-selling book. It is called The Trump Code, Exploring Time Travel, Nikola Tesla, and the Trump Lineage. Troy, welcome to The Truth.
Hi, John. It's great to be on your show.
I should also say that you are an award-winning journalist, having been an editor of the Los Angeles Daily News for a number of years. And you also had a stint in Florida at Chrisma Media. So help us, tell us, are we in the best of times or the worst of times?
Well, I certainly think that since President Trump's reelection, we've seen a gigantic economic and spiritual turnaround in the world. We're seeing the world sort of come back into alignment here. But of course, this is a very tumultuous situation, as we've seen with the tariff war that's going on now. Everything he tries to do to turn things around, they're fighting him tooth and nail, just like they did, in his first administration and in between his first and second administrations. I mean, we've never seen anything like this in probably American history that I can recall.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, and it's a quizzical to me why someone would want our tax dollars to go pay to counsel trans men on birth control. I mean, it's just like the craziest sort of things that I've ever heard of. And teaching Mid-Eastern journalists how the proper use of pronouns. And these are U.S. tax dollars. I mean, who is for this stuff? I mean, where is it coming from? And we're supposed to be, I guess we're not virtuous unless we buy into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, just like the Bible said, evil will be called good, good will be called evil. I mean, we saw just how corrupt and wicked everything has become the last 4 years under the Biden administration. Just like you mentioned, these just absolutely crazy policies, wasting billions, tens of billions of dollars on these, just ridiculous, policies. And, so now President Trump and, Elon Musk, Department of Government Efficiency and his team, they're discovering billions of dollars in waste, fraud, abuse. When I was a reporter at the LA Daily News, I covered county government, and that's pretty much all the story I ever wrote about was waste, fraud, and abuse at the county level. And now we're discovering just how gigantic this is at the national level. I wouldn't be surprised if our national debt maybe somewhere be in the range of all how we've been ripped off for decades and decades by foreign countries, and just waste, fraud, and abuse. It's just mind-boggling how much money, taxpayer money, has been wasted here.
Well, if one thing Doge has taught us, it is that there is a complete lack of accountability for spending at the federal level. They can't even tell you where the money was appropriated, who authorized it. There are no memo lines on the checks that will help you decode it and unscramble this huge pile of spaghetti represented by trillions of dollars of spending. Ben Franklin said, I think it was Ben Franklin, that they gave us a republic if we could keep it. It really feels like it's kind of tenuous to me right now.
Yeah, that's I've now written 7 books, exploring current events, how they might align with biblical prophecies, and I think we were. My last book with Pastor Paul Begg is called Revelation 9/11, how the Book of Revelation intersects with today's headlines, and I think we were potentially on the verge of the events of Book of Revelation. I think God intervened. He's given us a second chance here to wake up and help turn things around, and now that effort is beginning, but. Just like Benjamin Franklin said, democracy, our republic, is very tenuous. If we're not fighting to keep this freedom and liberty, I have many ancestors who fought in, World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War, died, bled for this country. It's an ongoing fight to maintain freedom. There's many countries around the world becoming totalitarian, authoritarian, and democracies in retreat. And so we've got to fight to maintain this for our children and grandchildren.
I have a good friend, Judge Ginsburg, who has been on The Truth with us. He teaches a civics course on the PBS, for the PBS network. And he's doing it because the schools are not doing it. And so I have this sort of suspicion that if you don't teach civics and American history and explain to kids how we got to where we are today, there's very little gratitude or even recognition of the sacrifices that you're describing that were necessary in order to secure our freedoms. So like most spoiled children, they just sort of take it for granted and have an entitlement that this is just the way life is. It's really not, is it?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. That's a big problem today with the younger generations. They're, the educational system has not taught them the history of our country and the cost it was paid to maintain this freedom and liberty. These polls that we've seen, 40, 50% of young people think that socialism and communism is a better system than capitalism. But, they've not been taught that, these socialists, even, Nazi Germany was a socialist country. These socialist and communist countries have resulted in the deaths, I think, anywhere from 100 million to 200 million people from starvation, execution, torture, everything you could possibly imagine. It's been a nightmare for the last, century and a quarter under these communist regimes. And so, why does everybody want to come to America and our freedom? People that come from communist countries come here and say, you're in danger. We almost saw essentially a socialist communist takeover our country, this push for Marxism in the colleges and everything, and even at the federal government level. We came close to this, but, like I said, I believe God intervenes, giving us another chance. And so, we need to educate our children on just how fragile these freedoms are.
Well, in South Florida, we've got a large South American influence. I'm sure that I'm not sure about Irvine, but I know that California's got their share of certainly illegal immigrants, being not a sanctuary city, but a sanctuary state, evidently. And I have talked to people from Venezuela who've said that they were there when Venezuela used to be a beautiful, wonderful, democratically run country, and somewhere along the line, it became a communist ruled country, and that they are seeing deja vu all over again in the United States. How do we stop it? We've obviously taken a giant step forward in electing Donald Trump and turning to more conservative, real hardcore conservative leaders, as contrasted to rhinos. And don't even get me started on the progressive factions in our country. But what's your theory for maintaining our freedoms today?
Well, I think the most important thing, and we're seeing signs of this now, is we're seeing the younger generation returning to our Judeo-Christian roots. We're seeing a lot of these secular colleges. There's thousands and thousands of young people getting baptized, becoming Christians across the country. And so, as this happens, I think we're going to see this spiritual turnaround begin and grow in America and throughout the world. It seems like there's been sort of a spiritual shift that's occurred since President Trump got elected. Not that he's a paradigm of virtue and morality, but I think God's sort of using some of the most unlikely people to turn things around. You see this story, throughout the Bible. And so I think that's the hope, is that we can have this spiritual turnaround, return to faith, our Judeo-Christian foundations. And then, as people read the Bibles, they learn about American history, then they'll get on board with what, God is doing and what's been, what's worked and been prosperous for America for, over 2 centuries. And, ever since the Pilgrims came here and dedicated America to the advancement of the Christian faith in the Mayflower Compact.
Well, Donald Trump is somewhat of a conundrum. I don't think that there are any perfect people on earth. But while he does have somewhat of a sordid past, I don't know that his marriages have shown a lot of endurance. But he doesn't drink. His children, to my knowledge, I know at least his two older sons are teetotalers. They're gainfully employed. It seems to me that he is, with the exception of his propensity to like the ladies, that he's led a pretty Christian life and is a pretty solid guy, and certainly has raised a nice family. I think there's a lot to be able to celebrate there.
I've now written 2 books on President Trump. The first one is called Trumpocalypse. This latest one's the Trump Code, and I'm actually writing 2 more books on President Trump right now. And I watched this documentary not too long ago. Is that all the women in Trump's life, and they interviewed them, and they all spoke very highly of him. And I know that he's been going to church since he's a little kid. He went to church at Norman Vincent Peale's, the author of the Power of Positive Thinking. He grew up in that church. He loved going to Billy Graham crusades. I remember I would watch those with my dad when I was a kid. So, he's been I think he's a lifelong Presbyterian. and he's done a lot to protect Christians, protect our values, and so yeah, well, none of us are perfect, and that's what the Bible makes clear.
So tell me about your tagline of your book. You talk about Nikola Tesla. What is that about, and how do you weave that into a study of Donald Trump?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is certainly the most unusual book I've ever written. So the Trump Code sort of puts together this 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle of how Trump fits in unfolding end time events. And one of the things we explore is what's called the Barron Trump collection. So there's a lawyer and author in the 1890s. He wrote this series of books. They're children's fantasy novels called the Barron Trump collection. It's at the Library of Congress. And there's been stories in Newsweek and Politico and Daily Mail on this for the last 8 years or so. And the picture of the boy on the cover of this book looks strikingly like President Trump's son, Barron. And he's guided by Don, the master of all masters. He lives in Castle Trump on Fifth Avenue in New York City, where Trump Tower now stands 130 years later. And they go on time traveling adventures. This is a children's fantasy novel. And so people have asked, is this somehow prophetic in nature, or maybe like, George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother and authoritarian state and that kind of thing. And then the Tesla connection. So the third book in the series is called The Last President. And so it says in this book, it says that this populist president is elected. It says the anarchists and the socialists converge on Castle Trump, shouting death to the rich man. And then there's protests and mayhem and all kinds of, chaos unfolds in America. And so now we've seen, President Trump get reelected. So it sort of seems like these books this guy wrote in the 1890s are coming true. And the Tesla connection. So Donald Trump's uncle is John Trump. He was a highly respected professor of physics at MIT. In the 1940s, when Nikola Tesla, the genius inventor, he was living hotel to hotel in New York City, and he had like 80 trunks of research. And so when he died, the FBI actually asked John Trump, President Donald Trump's uncle, to go look at all of Tesla's research, including, ideas about time travel and possible all kinds of technologies we may have developed over the decades. And Trump's uncle came back and said, well, I don't think there's really anything of national security interest here. But then all these Tesla files went missing. And so the History Channel did a special not too long ago on the missing files of Tesla. And so the idea is that the government probably uses genius research from Tesla to invent all kinds of top secret weaponry and technologies over the decades. And possibly, there could be some kind of connection to President Trump and knowledge his family may have into these top secret technologies. So that's something we sort of unpack in the Trump Code.
That is an absolutely fascinating story, and one that I had not heard. So let me ask you, in writing this book, did you glean any particular insights into the war in the Ukraine with Russia that maybe the mainstream media has not shared with us? Have you got a perspective that differs from the narrative at all?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that in the Trump or in the Barron Trump collection, the little boy Barron, guided by Don, they go to Russia. There's all these like trips to Russia, trips around the world. They meet with these world leaders. And, it's interesting that, President Trump has been able to meet with, President Putin. He's met with the leader of North Korea. He's met with the leader of China, Saudi Arabia and that kind of thing. And so he sort of gets this open door. He develops, fairly good relationships with these people. And hopefully that will be instrumental in helping bringing this terrible war in the Ukraine to an end. And he can, hopefully negotiate some kind of peace that will resolve this situation. I mean, we've essentially come to the verge of nuclear war over the last few years with all kinds of threats from these, highly dangerous nations. And so anything he could do to bring peace to this situation would certainly be a very good thing.
Troy, you hit the nail on the head for me. I have said, or on this program, every Saturday for about 6 months while we had the disaster of Joe Biden in the White House, who was encouraging the use of U.S.-made munitions to be fired into the heartland of Russia. I felt it was the most reckless event that I've ever seen in my lifetime that absolutely had the potential to spark a nuclear war. And I just got down on my hands and knees and thank God that Donald Trump was elected president and would put an end to the madness. I mean, When you talk about Trump meeting these other world leaders, isn't that his job?
Yeah. I mean, that certainly is his job. His job is to try to maintain as good a relations with other world leaders as possible. And as we saw, President Biden, he refused to meet with these other world leaders. So there was no diplomacy, there was no, establishment of good relations, and so it's just common sense. The better friendship you have with somebody, the less likely they are going to kill you.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, we were really taught that we were supposed to dislike intently Nikita Khrushchev, who was the head of the Soviet Union. And then we've learned since then that Kennedy and Khrushchev actually had somewhat of a rapport with one another and that they back channeled each other while they were both the leaders of their respective countries. Now, Trump is criticized by the mainstream media and some of these liberal left lunatics that he had, and they try and subvert that into something that it's not. To me, they try and make it sound like something that's unseemly, that Trump would try and develop a relationship with the second, the owner of the second largest nuclear weapons on Earth. I say, isn't that a good thing? I mean, at least they can pick up the phone and call each other if things really get tense.
I actually took a class in college back in the '80s on nuclear war, and they detailed that we've come to the verge of nuclear war numerous times since the invention of atomic bombs. I think it's just the hand of God that stopped it from happening. Because I mean, think about it. Human error occurs all the time. How have we not managed to blow up the world in the last 80 years? So anything we could do to maintain good relations, you know, wisely maybe reduce some of the amount of nuclear weapons we have, so sort of reduce this threat of war in the world is a very wise thing to do. And President Trump is a peacemaker. And so yeah, the media. I used to be a member of the mainstream media, and it wasn't that bad back then, but it's gotten so bad now. It's just become sort of a propaganda arm of the deep state and Democrats. It's just a sad thing to see.
How do they pull that off? How do they co-opt obviously well-educated, smart people who have this God's gift that they've developed that can sit down and write a book or a 200 word, 800 word newspaper article? How do they win them over? And they seem to all be proxies of the left. And maybe I'm just blinded. Maybe there are conservatives that fall into that same category that we don't recognize. But it certainly seems like, you read about the Robert Woodward. I got Woodruff on the brain. Woodward. I'm from Atlanta. Woodruff is a very prominent, iconic name in Georgia. But Bob Woodward, the author of the Watergate books and the leading detractor of Richard Nixon during that era, we now have found out that he never had a journalistic background. He just mysteriously showed up at the Washington Post and was assigned the most notable news story of the century. And then we find that he was a naval intelligence officer and had very close ties to the CIA. Surprise, surprise. How does it happen? How do they co-opt these people?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something we've learned over the last few decades. Is a lot of the journalists, in America, throughout the world, actually are intelligence agents. They work for the CIA, different intelligence agencies like that. I interviewed Jim Mars here a few years ago. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He was a reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and he told me that he had found out that all the large newspapers in America have CIA operatives on their editorial boards to sort of monitor things, keep a watch on the deal. And so, when I worked in newspapers for 20 years, small newspapers up to the LA Daily News, you just sort of, you gleaned from, talking to your editor, talking to other reporters in the newsroom, what's sort of permissible, what you can write about, what's sort of out of bounds. And that was, over 15 years ago. So imagine how much has changed now. Newspapers have been downsizing and laying off reporters and editors for about 15 years now. So I think there's been a big shift of journalists like myself, because I write for Newsmax, I write for the Christian Post, Town Hall, a bunch of conservative and Christian media outlets now. So it's probably been a big shift of Republicans and conservatives out of the mainstream media into the conservative media. And so that sort of leaves the mainstream media just with, Democrats and liberals and I guess intelligence operatives.
At any time in your career, did you ever feel like you'd been approached by someone that was trying to co-opt you and make you a proxy for the deep state?
Well, when my second book, the Trumpocalypse, came out, a CIA agent actually met with me. We had lunch together. He was a super nice guy, and he'd read Trumpocalypse, and he had all these like highly detailed, even theological questions that he asked me, and I figured it was all getting piped back to the headquarters. And so I just tried to answer it as truthfully as I could, but they didn't try to, he sort of hinted that if I went off the reservation, they could take me out, but I've never heard from him again.
You legitimately felt threatened by what he said to you over lunch?
It was a very subtle way he said it, but yeah, there was sort of an unspoken or a hinted threat there.
Do you remember the words that you could share with us?
I think he said something like, if we could come in and get you out of your bed in the middle of the night, take you to like a black ops site, something like that. But he didn't target at me, but he said that just in general, that's something they could do.
Well, that wasn't so subtle in my view. I get the message, and I'm clear across the country. But we also learned in the unraveling of the Twitter files from Mike Taibbi that the FBI paid Twitter before Elon Musk bought it $3.4 million to cancel and censor people that said anything that didn't go along with the narrative on COVID and the vaccines. We've since learned that Politico received almost $10 million in subscriptions from the federal government. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm prone to share my Wall Street Journal with my wife and other members of my household. So I'm not sure why all the federal government people had to have their own private subscription to Politico, but it ranged almost, I think it was $8 or $9 million that the Biden administration paid Politico. And my guess is that's the tip of the iceberg, that money very much has been paid to make sure that people wrote what the government wanted them to write. And that's like, I said the other day on the show, that's like finding out when I was a kid that there wasn't a Santa Claus. I mean, that's really devastating to learn to me.
A friend of mine, he freelances for this for like all kinds of major media outlets all over the world. And I had lunch with him a few years ago, and I said, what do you think is really going on here? He goes, Troy, I think pretty much everybody sort of bought off. This is back during the Biden administration. Everybody sort of bought off, paid off in some fashion, and I think there's a certain amount of truth to that. There's been a lot of that going on, but now we're seeing this big turnaround. We're seeing this pushback with President Trump and his team in office, and so it's very encouraging and hopeful to see this big turnaround that we're experiencing now.
Are you disappointed at all that there haven't been more disclosures, i.e., in the Epstein files? And do you think we've gotten all the Kennedy files? I mean, do you really feel like they've met their promises that they said day one they're going to release all this stuff? I'm kind of still waiting.
Yeah, I imagine, President Trump's under, a certain amount of constraints, plus, most of the people that work in the federal government, especially these intelligence agencies, have been there for a very long, long time. Many of them are part of the deep state. I'm sure it's very difficult to figure out who's who and try to root out the bad actors, that kind of thing. And so, of course, there's going to be a lot of pushback, releasing anything damaging, anything that might incriminate somebody. So it's going to be hard to get, a lot of the real truth out of these agencies, because they redact the stuff they don't want us to see.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to agree with you, and I think they're finding out that it's a lot easier to criticize government than it is to actually be a part of the governing. I'm sure it's a complicated Rubik's Cube, just like we're watching play out with the tariffs. In our last few minutes remaining here, any insights into President Trump's high wire act on trying to impose tariffs and not crash our economy in the process?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we just got to remember he's the author of The Art of the Deal. And, America's been ripped off for decades and decades with these unfair tariff situations, the free trade agreements. And so he's trying to turn this around. He's trying to attract manufacturing and businesses back to America. Much of our country has been hollowed out and decimated by the loss of these, auto companies and many different manufacturing companies throughout our country. And this has hurt our economy. And so what he's doing now is going to help turn that around, restore the nation, and he's going to do unpredictable things like we've just seen the last few days. But today he's saying let's negotiate with all these countries that want to negotiate. So hopefully we'll get better deals with many countries. China's going to be obstinate, but many countries are coming to the table, and so I think he's a master negotiator. My literary agent like to say he's a master magician. And, look over here, look over there, but I think it's going to work out in the long run.
Well, you and I see it the same. I think that he had to take a tough line, and he had to scare the bejesus out of these people to get them to actually come to the negotiating table. I think they kind of fall into three categories, really. You've got our allies who have become, and I point to the EU when I say that, much like spoiled children who have been spoiled for the last 50 years, and now we're taking away the allowance, and they don't like it. And then you've got people like China who really have been trying to undermine us while taking the money that they've made off of us to build their military and the vast machine that they've created. And so I think Trump is trying to rein all of that in. And I do analogize it to a high wire act. It is he said it's like playing 1,000 Super Bowls, actually. And I just so appreciate what he is doing. But while he scared the bejesus out of our trading partners, he flat out scared the bejesus out of me. And I'm just hoping that he'll figure out how to right the ship without wrecking it. And I think he will. And I'm just so grateful for you to come on with us today. Troy, where do we buy the book, The Trump Code?
Yeah, so the Trump Code's become a number one bestseller. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or you can go to my website. It's troyanderson.us, and we all have all kinds of great newsletters you can sign up on there also.
Well, I will definitely do that. And the book that you also referenced, The Time Travel of Barron Trump, did you say you got to go to the Library of Congress to find it?
Oh yeah, no. You can order the Barron Trump collection also on Amazon and actually read these children's fantasy novels from the 1890s. It's sort of like this is like the time of the popularity of Alice in Wonderland. So those are pretty fascinating too. In fact, the third book I reread it again last night, and it ends with the destruction of Washington D.C. So let's certainly pray that doesn't happen at some point.
Well, we don't want to end Washington D.C. We just want to tame it. And I think that's what we're watching right here in real time. So thank you so much, Troy Anderson. And we really appreciate your time. I hope you'll come back soon and have a great rest of your weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great honor.
Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. And the American farmer is at crisis. Here to help us sort it all out is Brian Resinger. He is a fourth generation farmer along with his sister. And he is a best-selling author of a new book called Land Rich, Cash Poor, My Family's Hope, An Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. Brian, welcome to The Truth. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. And, you and I do have something in common. When I grew up a long, long time ago as a little boy in mid-Ohio, all of my relatives were farmers. And my dad, we lived in town. He was an automobile dealer, but we would go out to the farms on weekends and play, and we'd milk the cows. I'd chase a pony for an hour to ride it for 15 minutes before he bucked me off. And I'd chase the little kittens for an hour to finally be able to catch one. It legitimately are some of the fondest memories that I hold in life. And you have had your ancestors and your dad have farmed in Wisconsin, and it's not all rainbows and butterflies these days, is it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a way of life that has beauty to it, but a lot of times that beauty goes hand in hand with the hardship. I grew up with many of the things that you're talking about. I remember coming down to the barn, and my dad would be helping a cow that was having a hard time in labor, and he'd help deliver the calf, and we watched that calf take its first breaths. Beautiful things like that. Work with my dad sun up to sundown. but also, the economic upheaval that farmers face these days, and really it's deep in our history. In the book, we explore all the hidden areas of history that are driving the disappearance of our family farms. We've lost 45,000 farms per year on average for the past century, and it remains a crisis to this day. And we weave those issues with our family story across 4 generations, and I can tell you that beauty and that hardship goes hand in hand, as you say.
Well, I have always had the perception that farmers work incredibly hard. I remember my great uncle, he lived well into his 80s and he was still doing the chores, and his face was so weathered and wrinkled because he was exposed to the elements. It was hot in the summer and just absolutely frigid cold in the winter when he would go out and feed the sheep. I remember it vividly, and I had a great deal of empathy for how hard he worked. The benefit to me was that I had some great role models.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I am so privileged and grateful to have grown up on a farm, because you learn so many things. You learn about the circle of life, you learn about hard work, you learn about God's miracles. Working close to land, working with the animals. It's incredible the things that kids are exposed to when they get the chance to be around it. And that's one of the things that we're losing. We're not only, as our farms struggle, we're not only losing parts of rural America, which matters to me. We've got parts of our rural economy in small town America suffering in part because our farms are disappearing, but also, it affects the values of our country, the things that people learn when we get further and further away from our food. And also the crisis is affecting the price and health and security of our food too. So it really affects every single American dinner table, whether someone's had a chance to set foot in a barn or not.
Well, aren't our federal tax policies the real enemy for farmers, in that when someone passes the farm on to the next generation, the taxes are so high? A lot of farmers just haven't been able to hold on to the family farm.
Yeah, it's one really good example of the challenges. There are so many, but a big one is federal tax policy, and the death tax, what they call the inheritance tax, is a huge part. The reality is that you got the older generation trying to pass the farm to the younger generation. A lot of times, the younger generation buys the farm from the older generation, so that the older generation can retire, because farmers don't have 401ks, things like that. So those processes are difficult enough. But if you have someone who passes away in the middle of that, now you got a family that now they're going to get that farm, and the taxes they have to pay on that inheritance can be crushing. And when you combine that with the cost of already trying to operate that farm, it can make the difference. It can be the thing that forces a family to sell, and it forces them to sell when they're at their most vulnerable. There's a loss in the family, they're grieving, and then on top of it, they got this huge financial burden that makes them have to sell the farm. It's absolutely tragic, and it's definitely one of the drivers of why our farms are disappearing.
So what are your main crops, or the main focus of the family farm in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so for more than 100 years, we milk cows. We were a classic Wisconsin dairy farm, small dairy farm, 50 cows. In spring of 2021, my dad decided to sell the cows because we were either going to have to get bigger, go to hundreds of cows, maybe thousands of cows, or make a change. And some families decide to get bigger. Everybody's got to make their own decision. For us, we felt like it had been enough, and we decided to diversify. So now what we're doing is my dad and sister are raising heifers to be milk cows on other dairy farms. They're raising beef for consumers, and they're raising cash crops. And we are constantly looking for new crops and new products that can be solutions for our farm. That's part of what I do with writing about these issues and having the honor to tell our story. I do a lot of talking to people about solutions, and I try to bring those solutions back to our farm to try to figure out what else can we do, what new forms of income can we find, because that's one of the big challenges for farmers, is that costs have been going up, and there hasn't been a whole lot of new entrepreneur opportunity for farmers. A lot of farms are stuck in kind of old broken markets that the price isn't keeping up with the cost of what it takes to do business.
Well, it sounds like the farmers are under assault from in every direction. You've got all the perils that the weather bring or don't bring, and then you've got ever-changing market conditions where the commodity prices seem to be being controlled by somebody else that the farmer himself has little control over. And then I saw a really fascinating interview just earlier this week, serendipitously, with a beef cattle farmer that explained that the regulations that our own federal government impose make it an unbalanced marketplace with foreign suppliers of beef who don't have regulations, and they're pumping these cows full of steroids and antibiotics and all this stuff, and you're prohibited from doing the things that foreign growers are allowed to do. And so there is a very unbalanced competitive landscape because they're able to bring their product into the country for a lot less money than what you have to spend to comply with the regulations.
Yeah, there's so many problems. And one of the things with the federal regulations is that it hits the medium and small size farms the hardest, because they don't have the money for the lawyers and accountants and lobbyists and things to influence the policies. And so you got, a lot of your small family farms are affected the hardest. And you're absolutely right. There's all kinds of unfair, improper imbalances in terms of the type of competition the farmer faces. If you give the American farmer a level playing field and you give them a chance for markets that are legitimate, you can't beat the American farmer. They're efficient, they're resourceful, they're hardworking. It's everything you want it to be. But the reality is that we've had the deck stacked against the little guy in this country for decades. And as it stands right now, it continues to be a very serious challenge.
So are you committed to the family farm for your career and in your lifetime, or are you going to gravitate toward being an author, which you're evidently very good at?
Well, I appreciate that. We struggle with that in the book. I'm honest about it. Growing up, I loved my roots. I loved growing up where I did, and I worked with my dad from the time I could walk, but I didn't have the talent for cattle and crops that he did. And so I'm very honest about that in the book, and talk about how, what led me to decide to pursue a career off the farm. And for a long time, I felt that I'd let my dad down. I was the first generation in 4 eldest sons who wasn't going to take over the farm for my career. And I hoped that maybe my sister would, and she did have that talent for cattle and crops that I didn't. Now I've had the chance, the real honor, to come full circle. I went and I worked in journalism, then I worked in public policy, and I've come back around and had the chance to focus my writing around our farm and the challenges facing our farmers. And so, I'm grateful for that, and I view my role as telling our story. And also, I've had the chance to get re-engaged with the farm. I help out on the business side. They throw me in a tractor on my day off. And so we're all part of the family operation trying to carry it forward. And I'm grateful my sister is gonna take over for the next generation, and that I can just kind of be a part of that in my own way. But it was a real struggle, and it was a challenge that we talk about in the book, because each generation you do feel like it's your responsibility to carry things forward. And so I'm trying to do that in my own way. But if my dad and I, although he was supportive of me all throughout my life, I think if either one of us had a magic wand, we'd wave it and have me back on the farm with the kind of talent and gifts that it took to carry things forward like he did.
Well, life has a unique way of pulling us in multiple directions based on a plan. I think it's probably God's plan, so I wouldn't beat yourself up too bad about it. It sounds like you've made a pretty nice life for yourself and reconciled that with your folks. Have you been able to, have your folks, your sister, your dad, have they been able to mechanize? We just talked to a preeminent scholar on artificial intelligence and robotics. There have been significant advances in the way that we farm today, from what I've understood. Have you all been able to incorporate these practices? Tell us about some of the things that are out there.
Absolutely, as much as we can. Technology, you're absolutely right, is a huge tool for advancement. It's been a big part of American agriculture moving forward. There's also elements of it that are a double-edged sword, and I'll explain what I mean. On our farm, we've got modern machinery. We're always looking to figure out how we can innovate next. But one of the things that's happened to our family farms is that America has begun to produce less and less of what they call scale-neutral technology. And the AI that you're talking about could actually help solve this. But the challenge, the problem that we have is that throughout the second half of the 20th century, and we talk about this in the book, the technology that we had began to be the kind that only worked for larger farms. It wasn't the kind that could work for large as well as medium and small farms. And so there was less and less technology that is practical for the family farm, and less technology that is affordable for a lot of our farms. And so technology has moved all of American agriculture forward, and also begun to leave many farms behind. Now, AI could be an example of something that could go either way and could help solve this. So for example, if AI is used to create a whole bunch of great big machinery that really only works for really, really large farm fields, etc., you can imagine a world where you got a guy watching a NASA bank full of screens on a great big farm, and that's all the kind of technology that AI provides, right? But if we could have small modular vehicles, and this is something that's in development because people are thinking about this, small modular vehicles where you might have, and let's say it's used to help fertilize a field with some nice natural fertilizer or organics or whatever the case may be. You could have a medium and small size farm buy one or two of them. You could have a larger farm buy multiple of them. And it's something that's scalable, where it's affordable. And that's something that we do need because we have a world where, although innovation is incredible, it hasn't been geared toward working for farms of all sizes and types. And I think that's what we need in order to bring our farms along, given how many we've lost over the decades.
So, what's the influence of tariffs right now on the American farmer? It's obviously a topic that is the forefront of every conversation that we have today. It seems like it is ubiquitous, that it influences every single dimension of our economy. How do you believe that it will affect your family farm?
Absolutely. Tariffs is one of those examples of an issue where farmers are caught in some cross-cutting winds. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of farmers who support getting tough on trade. There are a lot of farmers who know that China and the way that it operates not above board has depressed prices and had other ways that they're kind of screwing the American farmer. And then at the same time, you'll hear ag groups and you hear farmers talk about how, they are subject to retaliatory tariffs. When we start putting tariffs on other countries and the other countries put tariffs on us, that can make it harder for American farmers to sell their goods abroad. And farmers do need to be able to sell their goods in America and abroad to be able to make it. So you get a lot of farmers who are supportive of the idea of getting tough and maybe support, drawing some hard lines, but we also need to work through these negotiations and get to a solution. Now, we've drawn a lot of hard lines with countries all over the globe. And I think the big question for farmers right now that a lot of them are watching is, okay, are these negotiations going to land in a place where we're going to get some fair deals? Are we advancing negotiations forward? So that's what I hope is that, in these places where we've drawn these hard lines, there's an opportunity to make more fair trade deals so that we can have tougher, fairer trade, but also still have opportunity out there without making it harder for farmers. So it's all about kind of what we do next at this point.
Is the new administration, do you think, are you optimistic and hopeful that they're going to help the American farmer? You got Robert Kennedy over there working on making sure that we eat healthy. That's been a big platform of his. And then you've got a new director of agriculture who I saw a great interview with yesterday. She is insisting that she's going to make life better for farmers. But you've got so dang much regulation like everybody else does in America industry today. What do you think the future holds for you in this current administration?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an administration that got so much of its support from farm country and from rural communities.
Yeah.
And so I do think that as a result of that, there's a lot of conversation going on between rural America and this administration, a lot of conversation going on between ag groups and administration officials. And I think that the American farmer has always lived with kind of the opportunity and the risk that comes with government. And I think that, when you talk about, RFK, part of what that's a reflection of is the fact that people care more than ever about where their food comes from. So if we can create new entrepreneurial opportunity for farmers who can be growing food, fresh, local, regional, and specialty food that more and more American consumers are going to be interested in, that can be a good thing. Coming into the USDA and being willing to shake things up on regulations and subsidies and things can also be a really great thing. And so those things are opportunities. And at the same time, we're working through, complicated issues like tariffs, as you just asked about, where there's a need and an opportunity to get tougher from the farming perspective on trade, but also a need to make sure that these hard lines are drawn, lead to negotiations where we can get a result. So it's a complicated picture, but I think that a lot of farmers gave support to this administration and are hoping that we'll be moving in a direction where we can begin to turn some of these issues around.
Well, I don't know you well, Brian, but you look like a pretty healthy, fit, good shaped guy. You're not overweight. What's your diet consist of? What do you encourage people to eat?
Yeah, I'll tell you, as I was working on the book, we became even more conscious of our diet. We've always tried to be healthy, but boy, when you look at the fact that our food industry has been pumping out, overly processed food and all this stuff, and a lot of those things are tied to the ways that industry has moved to make things harder for farmers. So we do our best as much as we can to try to live out what I talk about in the book as far as solutions, which is one of the solutions is consumers trying to consume as much, local fresh food as they can. So we try to buy as much produce as we can from farmers markets, try to buy from grocery stores that carry local goods because there are grocers that are willing to do that if they know people will buy it. and we do our best to try to have as much fresh local food as we can, and we try to stay away from the processed stuff. And my hope is that more and more people can do that, and more farms can move in the direction of growing the kind of food that people who care where their food comes from want. And that's a direction that I hope our entire economy can go.
Well, I think one of the most staggering statistics that I've read of late is that we spend more on healthcare than any other nation in the world, yet we are way down the list in terms of our nation's health. And Kennedy again points to our food and diet as the reasons for, largely for the reasons for our bad health. I got a lot of friends that are doctors, so if you're listening, no offense, but I stay as far away from doctors as I can. I've known too many people that have gone to the hospital to get well and they never walk out again. So that's my formula. Just, I love doctors when I need them, but otherwise I'm staying the hell away. But are there any absolute foods that you prohibit or that you just refuse to eat?
I'm not all that doctrinaire about it. I think we just try to stay away from processed food as much as we can. When I was younger, grab fast food on the go kind of thing. We try to avoid that sort of thing as much as we can. I don't know if I have any real specific formulas. I think that my overall attitude would be, if it grew naturally out of the ground, it's probably a good thing. If it was formulated in a lab, you might want to be a little careful about it.
So the book is called Land Rich, Cash Poor: My Family's Hope and the Untold History of the Disappearing American Farmer. How's the book done so far?
Well, it's going great, and I'm grateful to say that. We've had sales all across the country, and we recently were named Book of the Year by the Nonpartisan Farm Foundation, and I do try to give honest input on policy issues from a nonpartisan perspective, whichever way the wind is blowing, and so it's a real honor. And I've had families all across the country reach out to me, and including farm families that relate to the stories that we tell, that have lived the kind of survival stories that we talk about today. And it's been incredibly rewarding. The other day, something that was really special for me. I was talking to a group of about 400 back home in Wisconsin, and my dad was there with me. He got the chance to see me speak, and at the end, they come through and you do the book signing. Well, my dad was standing there, and I had decided I was going to tell stories about him from the stage that day because he was there in the crowd. And people started walking up to him and asking him to sign the book. And that was such an incredible thing for me, to have our worlds kind of merge that way, and for people to really honor him in what he's done with his life. It was a rare moment. I don't know if I'll get back in life.
That is such a wonderful story and a great way to end our interview. But I have to ask you one last question before I let you go. Did you ever grow hay on your farm?
We did, and we still do. Yep.
And you store it in a barn?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And
So,
when I was a kid, we did the small square bales that
yeah.
you had to move by hand.
So would you build tunnels through the barn with the hay?
I would. We built tunnels. We built forts. We swung on ropes like Indiana Jones, the whole deal.
Well, as did we. My grandfather had this huge, beautiful barn. It had T.E. Gordon and Son painted on the top of it. And I don't know, I was 5, 6 years old. It seemed like it was 4 or 5 stories tall. I'm sure if I went back and looked at it today, it'd probably be a matchbox. But we would build tunnels through the hay from the ground all the way up to the top and back down to the bottom. And why I'm here alive to be able to talk about it today, I'm not sure. But thank you, Lord, for protecting us, because it seemed pretty high risk looking back on it. But Brian Resinger, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you and your family well, and we certainly need our American farmers. So thank you for all of the sacrifices and the good work that you and your family have done.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate all you do to raise awareness of issues, and I'm glad you made it through those hay tunnels. We don't want to have any hay tunnel cave-ins, so I hope kids are careful out there.
Well, they sure are happy memories, and I'm glad I was able to experience them. Have a great rest of your weekend. Come back anytime.
Thanks so much.